Hello, everyone. Megan Owens here. I'm the Director of Transportation Riders United, and I'd like to welcome everyone to TRU's latest Transit Tuesday talk on Countywide expansion. TRU is proud to host these semi-regular presentations about what's happening in the world of public transit. There's so much happening across Southeast Michigan and across the state. So every month or two, we bring together transit experts to share with you what is happening. And today we are very pleased to be joined by Mallory Avis of Calhoun County to talk about the expansion that they just passed in uh, just 4 months ago, and then to have a couple of folks from Oakland County to share with us what passed back in 2022 and how it is being implemented today. And then, of course, we'll have some opportunities for some questions and for some updates. Um, and in case anyone's not familiar, Transportation Riders United, we are proud to be the Detroit region's public transit advocacy organization. We educate, we mobilize, we advocate for more and better public transportation and other affordable, sustainable mobility options. We believe everyone should be able to get where they need to go, regardless of whether they can drive. So find out more at detroittransit.org. Share any of your thoughts or experiences on social media at Detroit Transit. And now we will shift it over to Mallory Avis from Calhoun County. Thank you so much.
So, as most of you all know, this doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it's a very long time. Sometimes it moves pretty quickly. For us, I'm going to say 5 years was pretty quickly, I feel like. All of this started in about 2018, 2019, and it started with a study, as most things do. Transportation study for Calhoun County identified a vast need for transportation. And pretty much everything kind of came after that as essentially the first domino all the way to the last until we hit the election. In 2018, the city of Battle Creek, which is in Calhoun County, did a study. In 2020, the county did a study. And in 2021, we launched a pilot to demonstrate the feasibility of what that study recommended, which was a countywide transportation system. And so with the help of MDOT, we launched what we call BC Go. And BC Go was on-demand, rural, and urban transportation that was app-based, the first introduction to technology for our community, and the first opportunity for many of our neighbors that are in rural areas to access public transit. From 2022 to 2024, we spent a ton of time doing community outreach, education, gathering those local stakeholders and grassroots groups to educate them and share what we learned from the studies, what we learned most importantly from BC Go, and then to tell them this is what we're proposing moving forward, and then this is what it's going to cost. That all kind of, stemmed on the November election. We went for our first millage on a general election against everybody's advice, and we passed. And we didn't pass by a small margin. It was nearly 60%. And I will get to what the millage rate was in a minute on a different slide. But ultimately, this was kind of our timeline, and I know that 5 years sounds like a long time, but I feel like in the scope of everything that was accomplished and COVID, 5 years was actually lightning fast for something like this. So the transit study that I talked about that covered the whole county, you can access the report with that QR code, but ultimately that transit study identified that more than 20,000 trips per year were being unmet. There weren't enough providers. There's a small dial-a-ride system that's restricted to its city. There's an urban system that's restricted to its city. And then there's small specialized services, or if you're familiar with Transit 5310 agencies, that operated within their program purposes. So it may be only for seniors, or it may only be for people with disabilities. And so most people who lived outside of one of the two cities had no access to transportation. Um, the study also told us that we had kind of two different options we could go with. And one is to keep a city system and create just a broader rural countywide system, or, if you're going to do it all and take everything, scrap it, and start with one big authority. And that's the direction that we moved forward. So our pilot, BC Go, was funded 100% by MDOT, both capital and operating. And using the data from this study, we planned this service. So we started with 2 vehicles covering 718 square miles. Calhoun County is pretty big. As of like 1 year into the pilot, we had more than 5,800 unique users and more than 150,000 trip requests. This told us that that study was way underestimated, that 20,000 trips per year that they've identified as being unmet was far greater than that. And so running this pilot gave us the opportunity to kind of trial and error what would work, what wouldn't work, and what did people want to see. We were very strategic and specific with how we designed our vehicles. So we chose black minivans, tinted windows, really went for a premium experience. The driver gets out, opens the door, greets the passengers, helps them with their stuff. But it also charged a premium fare up to $15 per passenger. In total, we were only meeting about 22% of the demand. And so, although BC Go is wildly successful, it's also kind of a failure in the sense that it didn't fully meet the need of the community, but it did give us the data that we needed to support the next step. So that next step was to tell the community what it is we were proposing, what that would look like for them. And so we proposed what we broke out into just 3 simple options: good, better, and best. Taking service 5 a.m. to midnight in just the city, shorter hours countywide. And the community really got behind the best scenario. Obviously, the best scenario also comes with the highest price tag. Also, during that period, the townships were given the opportunity to opt out, as is allowed under Public Act 196. This means all of our rural townships opted out. Now, they still have service under our BC Go pilot that's still running, but legally within the jurisdiction of the authority are just the 4 cities: the city of Albion, the city of Marshall, the city of Springfield, and the city of Battle Creek. Now, that doesn't mean that they can never have service. In fact, some of them now, after the millage has passed, have approached us again and said, okay, maybe what do we need to do to get service? The board was appointed in early 2024. So January or February was the first board meeting. Keeping in mind that timeline, how accelerated it is, I was telling you, the ballot language for a November election is due in August. So this board wasn't appointed until January. First meetings, they met bi-weekly, and really just hit the ground running. And these are the people from each community that really led and were the champions of attending every Chamber of Commerce meeting and City Council meeting to really get the message out, answer questions, and make sure everybody heard of Ride Calhoun. Now, this is probably the most shocking part, I think, for most people, was when we explained that best scenario and the price tag that it came with. It was 2.66 mils. And so that board decided, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Let's build a system that's truly going to meet the need of the community and not ask for a lesser amount because we're afraid it won't pass. So they went all in and really stepped up to make sure that the community understood why the millage was going to be 2.66 mils, what that meant, and then what that service translated into. So this was kind of the image that they communicated to the public. Right now, we have Battle Creek Transit, and it has fixed route service, paratransit service, and then our on-demand pilot. But the board hired a marketing firm to help them brand the Transportation Authority of Calhoun County because TAC just doesn't sound as catchy as something like Ride Calhoun. So the marketing company helped the board come up with 3 different names for the 3 different service types. So we'll have RC Max, RC Move, and RC Flex, each providing a different type of service. And we felt it was really important that those things be done up front prior to the passing of the millage so that people could put a visual with it. They could see this is what the service is going to look like. This is what the service is going to be called. These are the hours that it's going to run. Even as far as like mocking up vehicles. So I don't have to tell this audience because you guys understand the need for transportation and the economic impact it has on your communities and the overall health outcomes that are improved because of transportation and access to transportation. But most of the community and most of our neighbors don't understand that. And so really, the board had the very difficult job of making people who don't need transportation understand why transportation and access to transportation is still important to them. So somebody who, lives in a $600,000 house, has 2 cars, and doesn't want their taxes to go up, needed to understand what that kind of trickle-down effect meant for them. We tried to, again, visualize what the different vehicles might look like. There's a perception that public transit only means big fixed route buses. And we wanted to make very clear that, a big fixed route bus isn't going to be driving down a rural dirt road. That's not the type of transportation we're talking about. And of course, the, usual negative comments about, oh, the bus is always empty anyway. We really had to try to visualize or help people visualize what these services are, what these services will offer, and who is going to be utilizing each different type of service. The board is very focused on quality and reliability. And so making sure that our services on time, making sure that the vehicles are well maintained and that the experience is positive for the rider has been paramount in all of it and in their communications to the public. Now, I realize this is a lot on one slide, so I'm just going to pick out kind of Battle Creek Transit right now. We have very limited services. We only run 5 days a week. Fixed route ends at 3:45. Our paratransit service and on-demand service ends at 7:30. It's not adequate. And we hear from the public all of the time that that's not adequate. That doesn't get people to work on the weekends or a multitude of other things. And so we tried to give a visual of what that could look like in the future. Excuse me. So each of the different communities have kind of a broken out now versus the future with Ride Calhoun. Some communities currently have nothing, such as Albion, who didn't really have anything other than our BC Go pilot. So for them to understand that, hey, now you're going to have access to something that isn't, restricted to a trip destination or a trip purpose. And then making people understand what's going to be different about this than the current system. So currently, as a department of the city has one pot of money that's divided amongst 50 different departments, right? We're funding DPW and police and fire and community services, as well as transit. And so there's limited funds to be split amongst multiple people. Under an authority model and under the TAC, transportation is their only focus. And so that means they're not drawn or torn with their time or budget to other needs and priorities. The priority is always transportation. And this budget was built to reflect that. So, where our current system, the budget or the service reflects kind of the budget limitations that we have, in this scenario, the TAC asked for the amount of money that will fully support the level of service the community is asking for. So I am happy to take questions. At the end, I think Megan said there'll be opportunities for questions. I encourage you to keep your eye on Ride Calhoun. We are transitioning our designated recipient status from the city of Battle Creek and the city of Marshall to the TAC, and we expect to be operational come October 1 of this year. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mallory, and especially while you're juggling a cold. We've all been through that over the last few months, I'm sure. But no, that's amazing that you were able to go from Battle Creek having such a limited service, um, just Monday through Friday, not even until 5 in the evening, to this sort of expansion. I'm really excited that your board decided to, what does the community need? Let's put forward a plan to do that. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mallory. And now we can switch over to Oakland County and see where Oakland County is a little over 2 years in. So a lot of us were involved in working with to convince the county commission to put it on the ballot, and then to help voters understand what would be involved with it, um, and then it passed with some pretty strong support all across the county. And Eli's gotten the job of actually implementing it. The planning and the promoting is only gets us half the way there. Now he gets to actually do it. So, Eli, let us know, how is it going?
Well, thanks, Megan. Appreciate that introduction, and it's going pretty well. Can everybody see my screen now?
Looks good.
Okay, excellent. So, yeah, glasses on, glasses off. I'm not sure which way to go. We're a little further ahead of where Mallory and her group is. The millage passed in 2022. And this week is kind of like anniversary, because it was in this week in February of 2023 when some of the first agreements between Oakland Transit and 4 of our 5 operators were actually brought to our Board of Commissioners to begin to operationalize the millage vote that was voted on in November of 22. I've got a number of slides that I'm going to walk and talk through. As I said, when I spoke with the group live in Pontiac a year or so ago, the presentation isn't as much fun as the dialogue, but I'm going to go through the presentation, cover a lot of information for you folks, and always be available for questions. So the next thing I've got to figure out how to do is advance the slide. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to overview where we've been over the past couple of years. We do have, at this point, 5 providers that we support directly through contracts. Cover some of the highlights, and then my favorite part, which is always discussion. So, as I mentioned already, the millage passed in November. The Board of Commissioners actually signed the initial set of agreements, and kudos go to Brett Razigan, the county planning manager, and Kristen Wiltfang, our trails and transportation staffer, who, before we even stood up a transit division, were able to work with a variety of the providers, corporation counsel, as I've learned to call, who our legal offices are, and fashion these preliminary agreements, negotiated some excellent provisions. And all that happened about a month before I started. I started in March of 23. So I'm waiting for next month, and I'll celebrate my 2nd anniversary in this wonderful place called Oakland Transit. As shown on the slide, we're providing funding to 5 separate transit operators. SMART is our regional provider. NOTA, WOTA, OPC, and People's Express are smaller tour authorities, tour transportation divisions of not-for-profit, but we're all working together to provide, as the ballot language committed to, transit services for all folks throughout the county. If you look at the map on the left, it says January 23, could say January, could say February, could say April. But what you see is a variety of colors, including some areas that are like a background color with some cross hatching. The lower right hand or the southeastern part of Oakland County was served by SMART. Immediately north of the SMART service area, in the Rochester Hills area, you'll see a couple of blue rectangles, and that was a small operation OPC. Just north of them, when you get into the Lake Orion, Oxford area, that you'll see the green color, and that was where the North Oakland Transportation Authority served. On the central left or western part, you can see the way this is all directionally oriented. So we had northern Oakland, and now we have western Oakland. And WOTA, the Western Oakland Transportation Authority, served 3 communities when the millage had just been passed. And southwest part of the county is, although it's colored in what might look like purple to you, those purple areas were actual individual contracts between several municipalities and People's Express. And so to kind of create the backdrop within the People's Express area, the folks could travel using the demand response services based on what was negotiated between the operator and the municipality. The driving range was pretty much limited to within the community or maybe a nearby medical complex. And then when you look at the other areas, you'll notice that not a full countywide reach. Switch over to the right half of the image, and what you'll see is the current Oakland County transit provider. The first thing that you'll notice is the checkerboard still has a lot of colors on it. SMART is shown primarily in the green in the southeast, although there's some lighter shaded areas in Rochester Hills, Novi, and Wixom, and those are areas where we have a combination of SMART fixed route service and some of our local authorities providing the demand response service. You'll note that the southwest, that I was just calling purple with individual municipal contracts, People's Express at some point along the way, halfway through the year in 2023, transitioned out of municipal contracts and entered into a multi-jurisdictional contract with the county. And so what that did was it created a wide open service area where folks from Lyon Township could go to Commerce Township, and we watched as the ridership grew. Most recently, this past summer, City of Novi joined, and that's why it's kind of a lighter color. They had their own local operator. So I understand what Mallory's talking about with local operations. Perhaps Mallory, a page out of our book, the contracts that we entered into had stretched targets for the operators, and we wanted them not only to serve larger driving territories, but to also work with one another to create this countywide system. So no, you can't get a South Lyon direct ride to Lake Orion, but using the multiple providers that are available, they coordinate with each other. And we do have folks taking what I'll call extraterritorial trips. Up in the upper left, you'll see the orange color, keeping in mind that on a January 23, the yellowish 3 communities across the west of Pontiac were the WOTA service area. Now you can see the lake communities up to Holly Township, Groveland, and that's a much larger service area, again, opening up travel for needs of people throughout that portion of the county. The green across the top is the North Oakland Transportation Authority service area. And again, they migrated to the west. And you could notice that if you look on the, again, I apologize if you're getting whipsawed back and forth, but it's the same slide. On the upper left side of the January 23, that's some of the base color with some cross hatching and a whole lot of verbiage alongside the image. It's all relatively crisp. And if any resident in those communities calls their local provider, the dispatch function at the local provider coordinates the trip to distances beyond the service area of that provider. And then similarly, the OPC, Rochester Hill, Oakland Township is pretty much the same. Questions like, okay, so how much money do you get? Where's it going? And so in the original year 2022 millage, the tax valuation of 0.95 generated 64.4 million. If we look at the recent millage for 2025, it was 72.9 million. So good news for some people in terms of quote unquote price appreciation and inflation, that we do have more resources coming in. But I would also say, and I'll cover it in more detail as I walk through the operators, we also have a substantial demand for more services. And so what comes in goes out. And one of the ways to measure that without getting too close into the ground is if you look at the 2023, about 20% went into a fund reserve. And as we're in 2025, we've got only about 6% of the overall millage proceeds being committed to a fund reserve. And it's because the dollars are where we want them to be. They're out in the street providing services to county residents to get where they'd like to go. Some of what you might ask is, okay, what have you achieved? So on these slides, what I'm going to try to do is talk about since the beginning of our millage time, January 23, to what's actually December of 24, we call it 2025. But one of the things that I've been busy doing is helping the operators acquire vehicles. So you can see the numbers on the screen, 109 more vehicles. And that's on a base. So when we started, there were 85 operating in those communities. We've more than doubled the number of vehicles that are available for our community operators. The ridership increase, again, 50,000 rides, dramatic, more than doubling, almost tripling. Lots more miles driven. So in addition to providing more trips, again, I mentioned that the service areas have grown, and so has the miles. But if you remember back in school when they were talking about the slope of the curve, just take a look at the image on the right, and each of the colors represents a different operator. I think the one that I'm going to focus on most is the one with the steepest slope, and that's the dark blue People's Express. When you look at the July to September 2024, that's when the city of Novi came into our system. And prior to the People's Express entering into an agreement and providing rides in the city of Novi, City of Novi had a handful of vehicles and was providing their municipal transit service within the community. The demands in that community alone tripled in a few short months. And so we've been running as fast as we can, both the county and People's Express, scraping everywhere we can to find vehicles. And it's not just vehicles. If you're on the operation side, you also understand you need dispatchers to field the calls, to program the rides, and you need drivers to actually operate those vehicles. So it's really an impressive story when you look at the increases. But please understand, and I am giving the credit to the operators who have been in the trenches delivering these services day to day, week to week. And it's not the positive story is not just within the smaller authorities. One of the areas that talked about early on was SMART and how they serve the southeast part of the county. And for those of you, and most of the TRU membership knows, this may be for Mallory, the southeast part is the most urban suburban. When you get out to the north and western edges, go so far as to call it rural, but it's more suburban, exurban. What's happened within the SMART area is first and foremost, when September of 2023 came along and 3 routes were extended into the Novi Wixom area. That was one of the first major service expansions in, what I heard at that time was in a decade or so. And then we built on that by working with SMART to coordinate the new Rochester service and a new White Lake service that serve areas that previously did not have fixed route service. So all totaled in terms of route miles, we added about 10% of additional service within the county. But we see, if you will, a 23% increase in ridership. It says across all service types, keeping in mind that when I talk about the extended routes and the new routes, those are for the fixed route service. SMART also delivers microtransit in terms of their flex service. They provide ADA paratransit within their service area and do coordinate ADA trips with the smaller providers. Didn't say this earlier, but all of the vehicles are ADA accessible, meaning wheelchair accessible with ramps or lifts. And you can see that, a couple 100,000 more riders in the SMART system. So it's interesting, Mallory, I'll share this with you. When we started, actually, in 2023, I would say 70% of my time was working, encouraging the growth of the demand response smaller operators. And as time went on and they got their legs under them and they began to grow their systems to meet the ever increasing demand, SMART then kicked off their Smarter Mobility Planning Program, and we began to coordinate the planning with SMART. I'll talk a little bit more about planning in a few more slides. So a lot of this you can see, and I'm since this is being videoed, and I'll provide the slides through Megan, that there were new communities that were added in the service area. We started out again back in the beginning with a commitment to have consistent experience for all riders. So again, in the early 2023, working with the providers, we found a $2 fare was acceptable. What happened as we began to introduce general public service, which none of the operators back in the early days, they were all specialized service, elderly, handicapped, some low income veterans. But we have asked for them to include service to the general public. For those who might be curious, carrying general public riders has been in the order of 10 to 15% by agency. So it's not as if the general public service overwhelmed the specialized. There was a lot of question of the demand for service and would the seniors still get access to. So we allow in our agreements the providers to organize their trips in terms of prioritizing the medical life-sustaining service, senior service, and then capacity that remains available is there for general public. Notice had 155% increase in ridership, so that's like doubling and then another half again. They have grown to the point where they used to have a lease tenant in their building. They terminated that lease, mutually agreed to, and are renovating the facility to create more office space, more drivers, more dispatchers, and more room for storage of the vehicles. What we're experiencing is, and you can see the dollars on the right side of the table, that with the addition of Independence, Clarkston, Springfield this past year, that there's about a 20% increase in the millage funding that we're providing to NOTA. Switching to the west side, 2023-24, WOTA, immediately upon adoption, served the lake communities. And then it was an interesting meeting. I would probably say it was about 5 or 6 months into my tenure. So it was kind of the summer of 2023. We went up to Groveland Township and had a meeting up there. And folks wanted to know, like, what were we doing there? They didn't expect to see us for years. And I said, no, well, it's a countywide millage and we're here to talk with you. The county didn't go alone. We brought WOTA staff, we brought NOTA staff, smart staff all came up with us, said, hey, we want to hear what you need. We want to see what we can do. We closed the session by allowing for the local officials to meet directly with the transit operators. And that's how someone says, well, how did you figure out which ones went to WOTA, which ones went to NOTA? They figured it out themselves. At that meeting, the Village of Holly, who was using paper dispatch, said to Kim from WOTA, hey, can you help me? And the next thing you know, there was an item bringing forward Village of Holly, Holly Township, Groveland, and Rose wanting to join WOTA, and couldn't have pleased us, the county, more, because what's happened is our footprint grew, not ours as Oakland Transit, but of the service available for the tax-paying residents. Like a lot of what we heard from Mallory, there was limited service. We have, through our agreements, again, both offered to pay, but attracted all of our operators to expand their service hours, 5, 6 a.m. Until 9, 10 in the evening. They didn't used to provide service on Saturdays and Sundays. And over a couple of years, they've all come along where we have general public service. You can note in the WOTA case, this is what I feel we're going to be moving to over the next year or two with all of the operators. You can see that there's a slight decrease in what the millage is supporting for WOTA. And that's not because they're doing less, but since their expansion was very early on and they were quick to grow, when we got into this year, they didn't need any new vehicles. So we took the capital that we had been investing in WOTA and we were able to redirect it to other operators that needed more capital in order to facilitate their service. OPC has the same footprint. They have expanded their hours. They're working on Sunday service, weekend service. They have begun to drive a little further in terms of meeting the needs of their constituents because they felt it was easier for them to provide certain trips than try to coordinate with other operators. That really is limiting, but it's still something that they're all committed to doing. Even in an organization that is the same, you notice 34% increase in ridership and a slight increase in millage funding. They have, because of the expanded service hours, needed more vehicles, more drivers, and obviously those things don't come cheap or easy. People's Express kind of talked a little bit about the impact of Novi in, as of last year, 192% increase. That's like remarkable. And that what happens is, and last month I just wrote checks for another 10 vehicles for People's Express to continue to meet the demands that are coming out of the city of Novi and the whole Southwest area. So this again looks like WOTA might have looked last year, 2 years ago. You can see an increase in millage funding, and a lot of that's capital to acquire vehicles. You can't overstate the role of the local providers. They're the ones who had to source the vehicles. They had to do the entire rigmarole to make sure that they were eligible for all the conditions of Buy America federal funded. And again, hats off to the staff of all of the transit authorities for stepping up to the plate as this major infusion of new capital came in. And who benefits? They're growing, so there's more employees working even for the transportation authorities, but it's really the tens of thousands of individuals that are getting service. Smart, again, already covered in larger detail, the 10% of the route service. The map on the lower right shows, bottom of the map on the left side is the extensions into Novi and Wixom. along the right edge of the image is a purple line that goes north to Rochester and then makes a left to Oakland University. That's the Rochester service. And then west of Pontiac, just across the top of where it says Oakland, is the Route 59 Highland route that's running out to White Lake, the Highland Road service. So overall, it's great to have 10% more service, being the county that encouraged the operator to provide significant new service for the first time in a long time. And then more recently, as SMART negotiated with its operators, they've actually increased the number of operators. They're working to balance the operations and the vehicles in order to continue to reduce the number of missed runs and to get their on-time ratio up. We heard some good statistics about that from their staff at a recent meeting. SMART is, in addition to being our fixed route provider, is also the facilitator, designated recipient for a lot of state and federal funding. And one of the issues, they support a number of community partner providers. And so they attempted to launch a regional dispatch software to bring everyone in under the same umbrella. Like some of the things you see on TV, when you try to launch a rocket, sometimes it doesn't necessarily get all the way out into space. So the space-based software didn't get too far along, but a lot of lessons learned. And they're currently reconsidering, and they're working collaboratively with a lot of the community partners and our transit authorities to go through and do a joint procurement, which hopefully will be on the street sometime this summer with a regional dispatch that has a whole lot of benefits yet to be seen. And then lastly, the smarter mobility planning process. I know Megan's been on a steering committee with me. They continued to refine their strategy, and we'll work with them on that. In summary, one of the things that we at the county do, and Mallory, I'm not sure what the future is for Calhoun County, but with a variety of operators, we facilitate monthly transit provider meetings where issues like, okay, how's general public transit working for you? Who's got more vehicles? What are you doing to address this, that, or the other thing? The county did set aside a access to transit grant program. We received 10 applications for improvements to things like bus shelters in the SMART area, for road diets to increase the safety for people getting to transit. We saw a intersection improvement for crosswalks and lighting for transit riders. The committee that reviewed the projects really wanted to see the linkage to transit. There were actually even some side walk access between commercial facilities, residential facilities where buses now have bus stops. So that's an exciting program. I'm hoping that next year when we launch the program for a second year, that the folks who weren't sure what it was about will see the projects that are going to be put in the ground this year. We're working with SMART and the local operators on dispatch software, trying to iron out the wrinkles in that. We do work with a variety as a county with the Department of Health and Human Services. We work with transportation resource referrals, working with low-income homeless and other clients, and working with the My Ride and other programs in order to make sure that we do walk the talk, and the talk is countywide service for everyone. And we're maybe not in a position to provide the service, but we're coordinating with those who can. One of the other wrinkles that has come up in this whole process is, so how is transit perceived by the public? And so the county board brought forward, or we brought to the county board a proposal to work with an organization called Qualtrics, and they have a specialty where they use a variety of survey measurement devices. Some are web-based, some are surveys and the like, but we're measuring the transit experience throughout the county. And there, if you go to any of our operators' websites, the smaller operators, a pop-up might show up. Would you like to take a survey? We got a couple questions for you. There are QR codes on the buses. There are any of a number of ways that we're getting feedback from the general public and riders. And we've just got this contract off the ground and we're using it to support our planning process. But now we're establishing a benchmark and we're going to see how we can improve service over time, and we're going to have real-time measurements. We're also encouraging our 62 cities, villages, and townships with developing some materials for transit-oriented development and transit-ready guide, things that they could do now in order to facilitate whether it's access for a cutaway to get into a dialysis center. The design's not always there. Sometimes the overhang's too low. The bus can't get in. Got to drop the rider off further away. So there's a lot of the details that you get to get into over time. As we're looking into the future, we have a community transit plan that we're doing with our 4 smaller operators. And then SMART has the Smarter Mobility Program where they're looking at their system. In summary, it's just a great story to tell. I'm pleased to be a part of it. Increased service, increased ridership across the county. Everyone's really working together, and it's always to the benefit of our riders, our constituents. One of the items that I'll just highlight quickly here, you'll see the free transportation for veterans. There's a program that we piloted last summer. We've provided over 5,300 free rides to veterans anywhere in the county with a single integrated agreement with all 5 operators. So it doesn't matter if it's SMART or OPC. Veteran calls, schedules a ride, and county gets billed for the trip. We've looked at safety analysis, the access to transit and community transit I've already talked about. I'll stop there. I probably more than spoke my time.
No, that was wonderful. That is wonderful. There's so much going on. It's definitely really interesting uh, to see how that all is being implemented. And those numbers are pretty extraordinary. I mean, more than doubling, sometimes even tripling, nearly tripling the number of rides being provided. Clearly, there's a huge demand, a huge interest in getting places, and so no doubt this is complicated, and especially the more rural the area, um, the the more complicated some of the trips are. But um, I really applaud both of you for all of the efforts you're doing. And I'd invite everyone to put in some questions. We have at least 2 plugged into the chat so far. Um, Mallory, Ethan was wondering how you guys defeated the NIMBY arguments. Not in my backyard. I don't want those people coming into our community. We've all heard it, and we can't always we're never going to be able to resolve everybody's complaints, but to what extent were you dealing with either anti-tax uh, or NIMBY type arguments, and how did you guys respond?
So I'm gonna say they were definitely out there. The TAC board did a much better job of not letting the NIMBYs and the negative Nancy's get to them. Um, you know, for me, just because it's so personal and I'm such a transit advocate, I felt the need to like respond to every argument against it, right?
Yeah.
And really, they didn't waste their time with the people who they were never going to convince. Now, keep in mind when we say transit advocates, really a lot of this was the board. We didn't have time to set up a like Friends of Transit group. There was no fundraising, and so all of our materials had to be education. They couldn't be advocacy, right?
Wow.
So the marketing firm did come up with a great campaign for us that was called "It's Hard," and for example, it's hard to get a job if you can't get to work. It's hard
Mhm.
to get an education if you can't get to school. It's hard to stay healthy if you can't get to your healthcare appointment. But at the same time, we were meeting with all of those groups that exist in every community, right? So we have a large industrial park called Fort Custer Industrial Park, and they have an HR group that meets every month or so. I can't even tell you how many times we presented to them. And I think it was those presentations that allowed us to kind of overcome a lot of the NIMBYs because we talked to people when they were in the setting that they could think of it differently,
Mm,
not in the setting of their home, their personal taxes, stuff like that, but in that workforce setting or in that healthcare setting where they know they need patients to get there, they know they need employees. So I think that really helped and you know, we kind of used the failures of Battle Creek Transit a little bit. So we used it to our advantage that, we know we're not doing a good job at it now. If you want it to be better, this is the only option.
absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I do like, I would love to see a little bit of that if you're able to share at some point some of those. It's hard. I think that's a powerful message just to let people know um, what that think outside of their daily experience. Um, I always like to say, I mean, if your car breaks down and you can't afford um, an Uber every day or a rental car, can you still get to work? No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, Eli, Michael noted he's tried a couple of times to travel in the Milford area, and there's been some challenges to coordinate between Smart and People's Express. I don't know if you can say anything about how some of those connections are going, how to what extent are some of the rural or smaller providers connecting to the service, the more fixed route services that Smart provides.
Yeah, great question. And this has been a focal point from the get-go. And I talked in several points during the presentation about the dispatchers and the role and responsibility of the providers. And we've been talking about that for 2 years. Unfortunately, and I mean this, and again, not throwing anybody under the proverbial bus, but the concept a year and a half ago was an integrated unified dispatch where anybody could schedule a trip and all of the operators would have access to the information. And unfortunately, that is still in the future. I think it's
Mm,
closer today with the joint procurement that's underway. But I think the direct answer to the question is if the trip is originating in Milford, the initial call needs to go to People's Express Dispatch, and they are the entity that's responsible for the coordination.
okay.
And similarly, if you're starting in Milford and you're going downtown Detroit, you're transferring to Smart and taking whatever transfers to get there, the return trip, when Smart brings back to the end of their fixed route, the pledge is that in this instance, People's Express would meet that rider and take them home. So I'm not in a position to know exactly what time and what the issues were. But I would say that, my contact information was available, be happy to take the call. But what I'll do is I'll refer it back to People's Express because, again, this was my favorite statement 2 years ago. I'm no Ralph Cramden. I don't drive have a bus. I bought 100 of them, but I don't have any. I give them to other people to use. And I really, I'm not passing the buck, but I can say that People's Express for a Milford-based trip is the point of origination and the point of responsibility, accountability. Any
Okay.
issue, get back to me. I'll be happy to look into them. I have had other citizens call and in working with the operators, and I think anybody who's in this industry knows, particularly in the specialized service, they're all in it for meeting the needs of their customers. And I've not ever had anyone call me back more than 2 times. So the interests are being made. Um, the confusion is that checkerboard map. Who do I
Yeah.
call? And I know Milford, it's People's Express,
Yeah.
and any problems, if they're not serving you directly, I'm you saw the numbers on the page. I'm paying, so I have to have a conversation with them.
There you go. No, I really do appreciate Eli, you being willing to be available and again, at least understand where the hiccups are. There's no question that there are some growing pains. A system this complicated um, is with this many local players, there is a challenge. And then hopefully, as Smart has been hiring more drivers and improving their reliability, um, that may make improvements. Michael also stated he's used the Highland route, used WOTA, um, and they've been spectacular. So great to hear. There's definitely more work to be done in terms of some of those improvements. Um, I did want to turn Mallory back to you for a moment. Um, excuse me. Can you say a little bit more about there are areas in between the four communities? I remember you and I had talked
Yeah,
a year ago,
yeah,
and that you had been working on how to make it a truly countywide system. Um, and I know that that's some of the discussions that have happened in Oakland and in Wayne. Is it a town by town decision, or does the county itself put the measure on the ballot? Um, uh, so can you say a little bit more about the areas between your four communities, and then are you providing connections from one to the other? How does that
yeah.
work?
So it is confusing, similar to what Eli said with that map. It's a it it's a patchwork system right now. So we will have one singular provider that is, where the difference is. There will be one singular provider that will provide service to all four cities. And then within those cities. So yes, you'll be able to get from Albion to Marshall or from Albion to Battle Creek and to, from, or within any one of those four cities. The areas you won't be able to get to are the townships in between. Now, that doesn't prevent us from entering into agreements or contracts for services for specific locations. So, if any of you are familiar, for example, with Firekeepers Casino, major employer in our county, major recreational destination, and they are in Emmett Township, and Emmett Township opted out. So now, right? So it's one of those things where now the conversation is with Firekeepers Casino, for example. It doesn't help somebody who lives in Emmett Township, but it at least helps people in those four cities get to or from Firekeepers Casino. And then we hope that as the time goes on, those individual townships will choose to opt in. They'll see the value in it and really potentially drive down that millage rate because when we designed the plan, the initial millage rate was based on full countywide opt-in. It was very optimistic, right? But as the township started opting out, and it was only the four cities, which are the most densely populated and the highest demand for service, it didn't really bring down the operational cost. What it brought down was the revenue from property taxes. So really, we kind of needed that full countywide opt-in in order to balance those things out a little bit. So hopefully, as we prove ourselves, right? I understand we were asking people to pay for something that didn't even exist yet. So hopefully, as we prove ourselves, more people or more townships will decide to opt in, and they'll talk to their local elected officials.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Again, this is hard. It is especially hard to sell something when it doesn't exist, to sell a concept. Um, so, uh, so yeah, being able to provide demonstrations of where it does work, I think is really powerful, and to look at similar places. And I do hope, yeah, that is one of the challenges. If you don't cover the entire area, the service becomes less efficient. So, um, uh, Eli, James was wondering, again, speaking of sort of efficiency and streamlining, are there any plans to merge some of the smaller providers? Um, or is there so much of a kind of local ownership over local services that yeah, is there any discussion about merging services from there?
So, Megan, I appreciate the way that you framed the question in terms of the tension.
Yes.
So, my response is that we're in the midst of a community transit planning project. And we have a consultant, HNTB, that has, over the first several months of the project, has collected a lot of data, reviewed a number of reports, and they're now beginning what they call the service planning process. And the part after the service planning, so once they figure out, they understand from the existing services that each of the providers are providing, where the existing demands are, looked at some of the normal socioeconomic demographics as to other potential service areas. They're now doing service design. And in that process, when it's done, there's going to be we wrote into the contract, an implementation phase. And so it's premature for me to say that there's efficiency of scale by consolidating. I think it's logical that there may be some, but when you look at a community where it's 50, 60 miles from one side to the other, I can tell you, I got calls from Smart, who has a complex in Troy where they're discharging some vehicles, and they said, "Hey, Oakland County, do you have some spots up in the Pontiac area that we could store vehicles?" We gave them 40 spaces at the county lot. And so to eliminate I did some quick back of the envelope math, save them over $1.2 million in deadheading. When you look at the cost of a driver driving a vehicle a half an hour, so I'm not using that to say we're not going to recommend consolidations, but even with a single operator, there's going to be different operating centers. And as you mapped out in your the way you frame the tension, institutionally, these operators have place. Their local boards are local officials. They're close to the ground, and there's some value in terms of responsiveness to the communities they're serving. I'm going to leave the answer right there. I think there's pressure both ways. It's in our planning process. You and all your members are welcome to participate and provide feedback in that process as we go through it in the spring and summer.
Excellent. No, it is definitely a tension. It in theory, having one entity that manages or does all of it sounds great, but it may or may not be more efficient. Um, and I think you do make a good point that if people are used to their local community driver, and when it's Joe who comes every Monday and drives my mom to dialysis, I don't want some agency from some other town messing with what works for us. So I appreciate that you guys are working that it is a work in progress. There is no, it's not one and done, that you're continuing to figure out ways to adjust and to enhance and to improve those connections.
So, Megan, just quick to add on to what you're saying in terms of Joe the driver. To be honest with you, with many of our authorities that expanded, let me say all of them,
Yeah.
what happened is they worked with some of the local municipal-based operations, and they offered jobs to their drivers, and the drivers took them. And so the same people are driving. I mean, instead of the bus saying "City of Blank," it says People's Express Woda Noda. But the relationship that the drivers have with the riders and the riders with the driver, that's part of the challenge
Yeah.
when we get into this very personal level of transit service. And we're continuing to work our way through that. But that linkage is really fundamentally important to the rider as well as to the operators.
Excellent. No, that makes This is complex stuff, and it has such an impact on people's lives. I really appreciate the care that you guys have given into planning this and continuing to listen. I love that as you said, Eli, that you've got QR codes and surveys and get consistently getting feedback as to how can you continue to improve. I want to take just a couple of minutes to give a little update on some of what TRU's got going on before we wrap up. I will give one last call out if there are other questions that folks, assuming Eli and Mallory, you can stick around for a few more minutes. If there are other questions that folks have either for these guys or for TRU, um, let me share briefly. Um, TRU is working on also providing people a lot more opportunities to get involved in a lot more ways that they can have a say. So, as many people may know, TRU's got a couple of major priorities that we're working on. We are pushing on a double DDOT campaign. How over the next 3 to 5 years can we double the amount of transit service within the city of Detroit? Uh, and so we have an online action alert that Joel or I will put into the chat shortly, where you can, in just a couple of quick clicks, you can send a message to city officials about the importance. We can't just continue same old, same old. Um, we need to really double that service, and there's some really exciting plans to improve if and when they can develop the funding for it. With that campaign, we also have a double DDOT town hall that TRU and our partners at um, Detroit People's Platform and Detroit Disability Power and Sierra Club and others are all working together for a double DDOT town hall that's going to be on Thursday, the 27th. So that'll be a great chance to learn more um, as the city starts into their budget process. We also have a campaign not nearly as catchily named yet, our state funding campaign. The state at one point in time covered half the costs of running local bus service around at all 77 agencies across the state. But that has been declining over decades. So we're really urging our state leaders to boost the amount of investment in our in that the state puts into public transit. The governor recently put out a plan for what's mostly discussed as a road funding deal, but to add $3 billion a year into Michigan's transportation infrastructure. What's exciting is $250 million of that every year would go into public transit. Wouldn't solve everything, but it would be a long way towards really supporting the efforts in every one of these communities. Um, and if you're interested, we're going to have a big transit day at the Capitol, March 12th. Um, we're working with the Michigan Public Transit Association, Mass Trans, other transit agencies, different partner groups around the state. So if you can take the day and come up to the Capitol, we are looking to bring 100 people from all across the state to all come tell our legislators why public transit is essential in both any transportation funding deal and in the budget. So lots of exciting opportunities there. Um, and then I hope nobody thought that this call was explicitly about the Wayne County expansion because that is coming too. We are very excited to be working with the Wayne County leadership, and over the course of the next year, they're going to be taking on what Mallory was doing a year and a half ago, and what Oakland County was doing 3 years ago, and really mapping out what would a countywide service in Wayne County look like? And I really think that what you guys provided gives a little bit of a taste of that can be complicated, but there are transit needs in every single community, and we need to figure out how every community can be best served. Um, so that when we get that on the ballot in Wayne County, that everyone understands the benefits and that passes with major support. So um, TRU is trying to develop lots of different ways for people to get involved in person and online. So tomorrow night at Techtown, we're doing a game night. Come hang out, play some transit games, chat with other transit folks. So that should be a lot of fun tomorrow night at 5:30. We also I think that's Thursday night. Yeah, is our Wayne County transit planning meeting. So let Joel know if you are interested in plugging into our effort to develop plans to engage and educate and advocate for transit throughout all of Wayne County. And Joel can plug you into to that effort. We also realize that there's a lot of people who don't know. There's all these great new services, and not everybody knows what they are. So we are launching a Tri-Transit ambassadors team. And March 6th, we'll have a planning meeting. We're going to plan at least one fun get out there and try transit event throughout, what did we say? I think April to October, something like that. So um, that's a virtual planning meeting. We'd love some people to help us plan out fun ways to get people on transit. Every month, we have a volunteer meeting where you can get updates on lots of different ways to get involved in TRU and in transit activities. And then we're going to do an in-person Transit on Tap, another social opportunity. And if folks weren't already out there in Pleasant Ridge today, the Michigan Department of Transportation wants to know what people want to see by way of improving Woodward Avenue, making it easier and safer and more attractive to walk, bike, take transit, while of course ensuring people can also drive. And we can, in fact, have a Woodward that serves all of those needs. Go to michigan.gov/Woodward plan to find out about, they've got a public meeting, a virtual meeting Thursday night. They've got an online survey, and this is the start of a much larger process. So lots of things happening on the public transit front. I guess I never really introduced them, but both Joel Batterman, TRU's campaigns manager, and Zanaya Kelly, our engagement manager, are both on the call here. So, and both of them are happy to talk with you guys at any point in time about ways that you can get involved. And stay tuned. We have a whole bunch more Transit Tuesday talks coming up. We just need to firm them up before we announce them, get all the details. So thank you, Joel, for plugging those all those various links in. I want to give one more check to see if there were any questions. Lots of thank yous, a lot of appreciation uh, for the efforts and connections. It's not always easy to see how all of these pieces and parts are happening, and it's always more complicated than anyone realizes. But I really appreciate uh, I really appreciate that that's how that all of these that all of these efforts are underway. So again, reach out, Joel at DetroitTransit.org if you want to get involved. I appreciate Eli, Mallory both provided their information. We'll put a summary of this on our website in the next couple of days with some of these slides and videos. And again, a big thank you to Eli, to Mallory, and to everyone for joining us this evening. Have a great night.